And catch up now on All 4.
The Election, Mary Berry, and the classic movie Grease, all seen through the brilliant young eyes of the Goggle Sprogs, brand new from 8 o'clock. First up, here's the Channel 4 News.
It's a hung parliament. Theresa May loses both her majority and her bid to strengthen her mandate to negotiate Brexit. But so far, she refuses to resign.
As I reflect on the results, I will reflect on what we need to do in the future to take the party forward.
Good evening. I know nothing. We, the media, the pundits, the experts, know nothing. We simply didn't spot it. Those early campaign claims of a 70-seat Tory majority, of a possible Labour slump to 100 seats. But Mr Corbyn defied the tabloids and what he cited as the underplaying of his campaign by others. And Mrs May, claiming she needed a bigger mandate, spent £130 million of our money in staging an unnecessary general election 3 years before it was due. In so doing, she lost even the 17-seat majority she had previously had. Tonight, her new government is to be propped up by the hardline Northern Irish Democratic Unionists, with no hint of her own resignation. Tonight, we'll bring you the facts and the figures of one of the most remarkable election results in modern British history. As Corbyn's young voters rejoice, the Labour leader calls time on her short tenure of number 10.
Well, the mandate she's got is lost Conservative seats, lost votes, lost support and lost confidence. I would have thought that's enough to go, actually.
And from hero to zero, how Theresa May destroyed her own election.
Well, here in Scotland, that great Conservative election gamble certainly paid off. A swathe of Tory gains across the country here, north to south, gains too for the Labour Party and the Lib Dems. The SNP tonight remain by far and away the most dominant party here in Scotland in terms of Westminster representation, but that dominance is distinctly hollowed out.
I'm in Northern Ireland, home to the DUP, the party now integral to Theresa May's hold-on power. What might they want in return?
Here in Brussels, European bigwigs have rounded on Theresa May, accusing her of an own goal which can only make the UK's departure from the EU even messier. But as leading Remainers in Westminster talk up the chances of a softer Brexit, is Theresa May going to find it even harder to negotiate a deal with the remaining 27 member states, with potentially catastrophic consequences for Britain?
And I'm in Wolverhampton, one of the Tory target seats that Labour held with an increased majority. Their success being put down in part to a huge surge in younger voters. We've returned to talk to voters young and older who we met during the campaign to ask, has democracy delivered?
So she says she'll carry on almost as if nothing has happened. But Theresa May went into this general election seeking a mandate to strengthen that hand in Brexit negotiations. She's ended it with a minority government supported by the 10 votes of Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party. With just one result still to come, here's how the parties stand. The Conservatives have 318 seats. Labour hold 261. The SNP have 35 MPs and the Lib Dems 12. Compared to 2015, the Tories have lost 12 seats, whilst Labour have gained 29. The Scottish Nationalists have been hit hard, losing 21, whilst the Lib Dems have picked up just 4. That leaves the Tories short of the 326 seats needed for a bare majority. But in Northern Ireland, the Democratic Unionists have 10 MPs, and the balance that is needed to back Mrs May. And as the 7 Sinn Féin MPs will not take up their seats, a Conservative DUP deal could have a working majority of 14, as results currently stand. Our political editor, Gary Gibbon, has our first report tonight.
Back from the palace, a wounded Theresa May, humiliated by an election she didn't need to have. Her very personal campaign, her manifesto, saw the party shed seats and spurred the opposition. You wouldn't know that from her words.
I have just been to see Her Majesty the Queen, and I will now form a government that can provide certainty and lead Britain forward at this critical time for our country. We will fulfil the promise of Brexit together and, over the next 5 years, build a country in which no one and no community is left behind. What the country needs more than ever is certainty. And having secured the largest number of votes and the greatest number of seats in the general election, it is clear that only the Conservative and Unionist Party has the legitimacy and ability to provide that certainty by commanding a majority in the House of Commons.
Some Tories were angry. There was no apology for her failed election wheeze. Compare and contrast this stone-faced look with when she first walked into number 10 just under a year ago, wreathed in smiles. And this was the man she hoped to humiliate. Jeremy Corbyn led Labour to its biggest vote since Tony Blair's landslide of 1997.
She thought that with the backing of the billionaires and the corporate elite, she could take your vote for granted. But she underestimated the Labour Party, and more importantly, she underestimated you. Now, the Prime Minister has no authority, and the Conservatives have no mandate.
It's 10 o'clock, and we can give you the result of the joint broadcast.
This was the moment Labour's Clive Lewis saw the exit poll. The surge of support for Labour boosted by many younger voters who hadn't voted before.
Wow.
And older voters, angry with Tory policies on care and pensions. In all, 12 Tories lost their seats. Housing Minister Gavin Barwell, no longer the MP for Croydon Central.
It's the best job in the world, so I'm going to have to think really hard about what's the next thing that I want to do.
Minister Ben Gummer lost Ipswich. He'd helped with the manifesto many Tories blame for these defeats.
The manifesto, which was drafted by her and about 2 other people, was a total disaster, must go down now as one of the worst manifestos in history by a governing party. I say one of the worst, I can't think of a worse one.
In all, Labour gained 29 seats. In Enfield's Southgate, North London, a Labour victory dance. There was shock on all sides at Labour's levels of support. Many Tory MPs thought they'd have a 100 majority, but they went backwards everywhere, except Scotland. There the Tories took 12 seats off the SNP, including the constituency of the former First Minister Alex Salmond. His successor acknowledged her talk of a second independence referendum probably contributed to the lost seats.
Of course, there is clearly uncertainty around Brexit and independence, which, clearly will be a factor in tonight's results. So, a lot of thinking for the SNP to do. The
Lib Dem leader Nick Clegg was swept from his Sheffield seat in Labour's rise. Labour's success has left the Tories dependent on the 10 MPs from the Democratic Unionist Party, founded by the late Ian Paisley.
We always make our presence known at Westminster, and now there's probably an opportunity to make it even more known at Westminster.
Later in the afternoon, after hearing that Tory MPs were angry she hadn't apologised for her snap election, Mrs May recorded this interview.
I'm sorry for all those candidates and hard-working party workers who weren't successful, but also particularly sorry for those colleagues who were MPs and ministers who'd contributed so much to our country and who lost their seats and didn't deserve to lose their seats.
On Brexit, the election results have reopened divisions between Tories. Those who think Theresa May is too hard-line against the single market, for instance, think they might just be able to reopen that question.
Without a doubt, I think a lot of people voted who want to take a more nuanced approach to our relationship with Europe, who think that perhaps we're going at breakneck speed towards Brexit and speaking in a monotone. So I do think it gives us an opportunity to have a wider debate about what kind of Brexit we want.
You don't think they were voting on Brexit at all?
I think that people felt they'd made the decision on Brexit last year. Look,
Some people are saying the opposite, though. Some of your colleagues are saying the opposite and saying that she's got to heed that.
I think that this election had as its key area public spending and the promises which Jeremy Corbyn was making.
The Chancellor, Philip Hammond, is amongst top ministers already reappointed to their jobs this evening. A bigger majority, and Whitehall was expecting Theresa May to get rid of him. all adding to the pretty dysfunctional atmosphere at the top of the party that advertised itself as a mighty force for stability.
And Gary Gibbon joins me now. Gary, she says she's here for 5 years. How long will she last?
I suspect not that long, and we could be talking about substantially shorter. You get an idea of how reduced her authority is when you hear that those words you just heard said by her in front of number 10. I'm told that some pro-Brexit ministers actually more or less dictated some of the language of that because they just absolutely wanted to stipulate what she said there. And then later, when she makes her sort of slight effort at contrition in an interview, that itself comes because of pressure from the party. You get a picture of someone who's going to be pushed around a bit in different directions. And talking to Tory MPs today, I have to say the range of views, attitudes towards Theresa May, I'd say went from about cool to venomous. It really wasn't much better than that. And when you ask them how long has she got, one of them said to me, there will be plotting over the summer. I suspect it will all come to a head at conference. Another one said, there is no authority left, no political capital. We are looking at a government at a time of national importance that will be a government of drift.
Well, now the nation is dependent on the DUP. Now, you need to help us. Who are they?
Well, they've been around a long time, not just in Northern Ireland politics.
They're the old Ian Paisley party.
They are the old Ian Paisley party, but he founded them. But they've been part of the government support network, as it were, from the moment David Cameron came back with his fairly slim majority. Well, it looked slim until we saw what Theresa May got. And there have been behind-the-scenes arrangements which make sure that they're happy with things that the government are doing, and in return they support the government. And I think it might carry on that informal basis. I don't think you're going to get any sort of major changes. It has been discreetly carrying on behind the scenes, but it must have implications, and some people have been raising it, for the Northern Ireland process, getting Stormont up and running again.
Perhaps embarrassingly briefly, but Labour, fractious and difficult in the build-up to the election, but brilliant in the campaign. What's going to happen?
Well, some of those Labour MPs, and of course the majority of Labour MPs who voiced their discomfort with Jeremy Corbyn's leadership, seem to be slowly coming to terms with the idea that this thing is actually here for the foreseeable. It's actually had a great big shot in the arm. It's not going away anytime soon. Some of them feel that they're sort of trapped in a hippie commune as far as they're concerned. But for the people who supported Jeremy Corbyn, they can sniff the promised land.
Gary Gibbon. Well, one feature of last night's results was the marked swing back to two-party politics. The Conservatives took more than 42% of the vote, whilst Labour had 40%, the biggest combined vote share for those two since 1970. Nobody else managed double figures. Mrs May saw her vote share rise significantly, but Labour had a much larger surge in its support, whilst the other parties all fell back. Our political correspondent Michael Crick reports now on the unexpectedly strong Labour showing.
He lost, but returned to Labour HQ like a conquering hero. Jeremy Corbyn had defied the pollsters, the pundits, and most of his MPs. They'd prevented the much-predicted Tory landslide and instead notched up some extraordinary gains. In England and Wales, Labour took 27 seats from the Conservatives, 2 seats in Yorkshire from the Liberal Democrats, and 6 seats in Scotland from the SNP. So Labour's gains were well spread geographically. Perhaps the most surprising, Warwick and Leamington in the Midlands, and Canterbury in Kent. Conservative for almost a century, and never Labour before. But Labour's 6 losses to the Conservatives were all north of Birmingham, and all in seats which Labour had held for many decades. At the Momentum party last night, they celebrated the left-wing group's using of social media to boost youth turnout to an estimated 72%.
He's got a bigger voter share than Gordon Brown. He's got a bigger voter share than Tony Blair in 2005. This is the return of the Labour Party, and it's happened under a left-wing leader like Corbyn, and they need to get to grips with that.
Lovely to see you. Mr. Corbyn was beaming as he arrived at his own count in Islington last night, though his high five with Emily Thornberry went a touch too far, perhaps. And watch this, no hard feelings between Corbyn and Michael Foster, the Labour donor who took the party to court last year and actually stood against Corbyn yesterday. When Foster said sorry, Corbyn gave a friendly reply. Then his thank you speech.
And you know what? Politics has changed, and politics isn't going back into the box where it was before.
In 7 weeks, Labour's poll ratings grew from around 25% to 40%. Probably the biggest campaign growth by any main party since polling began. There were mishaps, but the manifesto proved popular and a new, relaxed Corbyn drew huge crowds.
Didn't you get it wrong on Mr Corbyn?
Oh yes, I have been completely surprised by the way in which he has conducted his campaign. I thought it was a barnstorming performance. To be honest, I didn't think he had it in him.
Labour Party, 21,000.
After so many big names quit the front bench last year, the Labour family now seems lovey-dovey.
Well, the Labour Party is like a family, and we have occasional disagreements and arguments, but you've seen in this election campaign the Labour family coming together, because we know the difference between another 5 years of Conservative government and what a Labour government would have to offer.
The irony is that many of the people in the Parliamentary Labour Party who attacked Jeremy Corbyn owe Jeremy their job. He's the one that's got them re-elected, and it's an extraordinary result, and it's a great personal triumph for Jeremy Corbyn.
Hang on, Labour lost.
No, they didn't. I think they've won the hearts and minds.
Won most seats and most votes.
I think they've won the hearts and minds of millions of people.
He's led Labour to their third defeat in a row, yet Jeremy Corbyn suddenly looks secure. Most of his colleagues now seem to hope he'll become Prime Minister. In another election, they want to be very soon, while they have momentum.
Michael Crick, with me here in Westminster, the Labour MP Barry Gardiner, Shadow International Trade Secretary, and we're joined from Nottingham by the Conservative MP and former Government Minister Anna Soubry. Anna Soubry, hard Brexit, is it dead?
Sorry, John, just say that again. I just lost you.
Yeah, hard Brexit, is it dead?
I hope so. I mean, I think that she has now definitely got to take a more consensual way of shaping the Brexit for the British people, because I think they have rejected hard Brexit. I'm not sure that actually Theresa May was ever offering that. I mean, she was not offering hard Brexit as I see it, but you know, one of the big problems that we have had, and I say this to Theresa, is it was a mistake that she made not to hug in the 48%, the vast majority of whom have accepted the result. They have accepted we are leaving the European Union, and they want to play their part in making sure we get a good Brexit for everybody. And I think if we'd started on that premise, we might not have seen such a poor set of results for us. I mean, it's bad for Labour, for goodness sakes, they didn't win. But it is a very, very bad set of results for us. I should be talking to you about my 60 to 90 new colleagues. Instead, I am somewhat upset and angry that so many good Conservatives find themselves having lost their seats through no fault of their own whatsoever.
Should she resign?
She should consider her position, John.
What does that mean?
She's a good, capable, strong woman. Well, it means exactly as I say. She should consider her position. But I mean, we didn't come close to achieving. We've gone backwards.
Anna Soubry, she went into Downing Street as if nothing had happened at all. I mean, she's going to carry on for 5 years, she said.
I know.
Barry Gardiner was nodding when you talked about the end of the hard Brexit. So now is it just a question of both parties pulling together on a soft Brexit?
Well, look, I think what you said about her wanting just to act as if nothing had happened, we've seen that before. We know that when she had the trouble with the dementia tax in her manifesto and did the U-turn, she said, no, nothing's changed, it's all the same, it was all there, the principles in the manifesto in the first place. That was wrong. She finds it very difficult to row back. Now she has to take on board that the majority of the British people have taken away the mandate that she was seeking. And that means that I think hard Brexit is off the table, and we in Parliament, in the Labour Party, will certainly be arguing for a Brexit, but a Brexit that is focused on the economy and jobs. We'll be making sure that she does not continue with austerity against pensioners and against the health service.
Anna Soubry, how long before we hear a Conservative MP demand her resignation?
I don't know. You'd have to ask my colleagues.
But you're not prepared to be one of them?
No, I'm not prepared to say that, because she knows in her heart the reality of the task that she had said that she was going to achieve, which we all believed that she would achieve. We've all worked extremely hard to do that. She put her mark on this campaign. I was Theresa's candidate. I was standing with Theresa in Broxtowe. It was about her and her leadership and what she promised us in terms of her mandate for the Brexit negotiations. And unfortunately, we have had a dreadful campaign with many, many failings. It didn't offer hope, it wasn't warm, it wasn't optimistic, and for goodness sake, we didn't even talk about the economy. And instead, we let Jeremy Corbyn offer free unicorns, magic money trees, God knows what else, holding out blatant bribes to certain sectors of our society. And we didn't even challenge those nonsenses, never mind actually have a proper debate, rebut them and win the argument. It is shocking.
We're very short of time, so a few very quick answers here. Would you join with Anna Soubry if she appeals to you to assist in trying to put pressure on Mrs May in any negotiations?
Let's be clear, we are the official opposition, and it is we in Parliament who, as the official opposition, will be holding this government to account and ensuring that she does not proceed with the hard Brexit that she is wanting to do. I would welcome Anna joining with us in doing that, but I think that's the way in which it ought to be phrased.
Anna Soubry, if she can mess up an election campaign as she had, throw away the advantage she had at the beginning of 20% lead in the polls and the rest of it, isn't there a real danger that not only might there be U-turns, but might there also be a messing up of our negotiations in Brussels? Can she be trusted?
Yes, I think she can be trusted. I've never doubted her abilities. This is why I was one of the very first Conservative MPs to back her when she announced that she was going to stand for the leadership. In fact, I think actually put my support behind her before she actually made the formal announcement. She does have the ability, but she needs to listen to more people than just the two people that she seems to rely on all the time. I'm hearing rumours that Linton Crosby is in some way being blamed for this election. That's a nonsense. We should have had more Linton Crosby and less of people who've never run a campaign, never stood for public office, who haven't got a clue, and that has been proved in this. But Theresa
so what are you going to do about
everybody, and she needs to embrace people.
Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill, these people who basically have been running Number 10. Mrs May has hardly consulted half the ministers she elected. Should they be fired?
Yes.
Barry Gardiner.
Look, it's quite extraordinary to hear Anna say that she trusts Mrs May's judgment with negotiating Brexit. We've just seen her absolutely excoriate Mrs May's judgment in the way in which not only has she run the campaign, in which she entered into the campaign, in which she refused to listen to her colleagues and became the prisoner of a small coterie. Given that you're making those accusations, Anna, how can you possibly say that you trust her judgment? It's ridiculous. She has no judgment, and that's why she was
Anna Soubry. Briefly, Anna Soubry.
I'm not having any lessons from the Mickey Mouse opposition of Jeremy Corbyn. Look, the other big story is the state of the Labour moderates. I can tell you now, they shed a few tears last night because they're lumbered with Corbyn for the next 5 years. And it's the loss of the centre ground. That's what really concerns me. That's how you win in Britain, when you're in the centre ground. That's another big lesson to be learned from last night.
Anna Soubry and Barry Gardiner, thank you both very warmly. And you heard it here first. She's asked for the sacking of the kitchen cabinet. That's Fiona Hill and Nick Timothy. When Theresa May returned from the palace to make her speech in Downing Street, there was an extra emphasis in her reference to the Conservative and Unionist Party. Hardly surprising when the whole survival of her minority government now depends on the support of Northern Ireland's Democratic Unionist Party. Last night saw a remarkable polarisation in results, with the DUP now holding 10 seats and Sinn Féin 7. With an independent keeping the only other constituency. So the Democratic Unionists have gained 2 seats, Sinn Féin 3, with all the other parties wiped out. So now, Andy Davis in Belfast. Great stuff.
John, the DUP might have approached last night dreaming of wiping out their unionist rivals, and they did that in dramatic fashion, but surely they never realistically imagined that they would be in this extraordinary position now of propping up a Theresa May government. So what hand will this party, the party of the late Ian Paisley, now play? What will be on their list of demands for Theresa May? They kept us guessing today in the briefest of press conferences. No wonder they were smiling. In a land where they filmed the hit TV series Game of Thrones, kingmakers know when their time has come. And so we wondered, as the DUP's 10 MPs filed in, what did they want from Theresa May in return for their allegiance? And we wondered the same when they left.
The Prime Minister has spoken with me this morning, and we will enter discussions with the Conservatives to explore how it may be possible to bring stability to our nation at this time of great challenge. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you. Arguably, it's the high point in a story which began in 1971 of a protest party founded by once one of the biggest protesters of them all, the late Reverend Ian Paisley.
Keep Ulster out of the south of Ireland! No!
So long the party of no, fervently opposing notions of Irish unity, it's been a brand of unionism laced with strong social conservatism, repeatedly blocking same-sex marriage legislation, resisting attempts to change Northern Ireland's almost total ban on abortion. And yet the DUP has changed dramatically over the years, from party of protest to party of government, epitomised in Ian Paisley's famous chuckling, power-sharing combination with ex-IRA man, the late Martin McGuinness. It is Arlene Foster, just 8 when her father survived being shot by the IRA, who now leads this party high on electoral success. But ever mindful she faces potent opposition in the form of Sinn Féin, themselves notching up another 3 seats. They are 2 parties desperately struggling to find a way to revive Northern Ireland's collapsed political institutions. And the more influence the DUP wields in number 10, well, the harder that task might be. And that's what's so intriguing about all of this, because it's not just a question of how the DUP might try to shape Theresa May's agenda, particularly on the question of Brexit, perhaps arguing for a Brexit with maximum access to the single market or a soft border with Ireland. It's also about how to avoid the political mess behind me getting even messier, because if the DUP try to put pressure on Theresa May on really sensitive issues like protecting soldiers from being prosecuted over alleged abuses during the Troubles, then it's going to cause all sorts of ruptions in the talks with Sinn Féin. Sinn Féin's President Gerry Adams said today of any potential agreement between the Tories and the DUP, well, it's bound to end in tears. But the point is this: the more the DUP get fated by number 10, the harder it's going to be, potentially, to get this assembly back up and running. And let's not forget, for all the talk of trying to form a government in Westminster, there has been no functioning government here in Belfast for months. Back to you in London.
Andy Davis at Stormont. So now to Scotland, where there was almost an entirely separate election campaign with its own issues, notably the need or otherwise for a second referendum on independence and its own voting trends. The SNP is still the biggest party in Scotland, by a long way, winning more seats than the other parties combined. But it also made the greatest losses, losing 21 seats while all the other parties made gains. The Tories are up 12, Labour up 6, and the Lib Dems up 3. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, is in Edinburgh tonight. Alex.
Well, indeed, John, we've been seeing earlier in the programme how Theresa May is obviously damaged. Well, she's not alone. Of course, the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, also damaged quite seriously by events overnight in this election. A third of her MPs at Westminster now looking for new jobs after a very long and difficult night. The new star on the firmament, the big gainer, obviously the Scottish Conservatives and Ruth Davidson, who've fought such a separate campaign here. We'll hear a little bit more about that in a second. But the First Minister today in this campaign, and that affected them. Yes, there was Brexit, but yes, most of all, there was that factor of the possibility of her party calling a second independence referendum, and that hold them very seriously overnight.
The Tory, the Labour, the Lib Dem election charge that all the SNP want is another independence referendum clearly stuck with enough voters. Around 4 a.m. at the Glasgow count, I put it to her. What on earth had gone wrong?
We have won this election, but we've seen a late surge to Jeremy Corbyn in parts of the central belt of Scotland that until a couple of days ago we probably didn't anticipate. Yes, the whole Brexit independence issue has been a factor, there's no getting away from that.
Alex Salmond, Scottish National Party, SNP, 19,000.
SNP former party boss Alex Salmond overthrown by the Tories in the northeast in Gordon. Up the road during the campaign, we'd met Tory hopeful Douglas Ross, who said, yes, I've got a mountain to climb.
Douglas Ross is elected to serve in the United Kingdom Parliament as the member of the Murray constituency.
But he made the summit, unseating SNP Deputy Leader Angus Robertson, and underlining what we've been reporting from Scotland during this campaign, there is no such thing as a safe Scottish seat. Across the night, Nicola Sturgeon said the SNP had won the Scottish election, with easily more MPs than all the other parties put together. During the day, she went for Theresa May.
The Conservatives have lost their majority, and the Prime Minister has lost all authority and credibility.
So this election's created a new political superstar. Ruth Davidson centring the Tory strategy in the election on attacking the SNP over a possible second independence referendum. Today, she centred in again on how exactly Nicola Sturgeon, she said, blew it.
Nicola Sturgeon's decision in March to demand a second referendum on independence. We led the opposition to that demand. The Scottish people spoke, the SNP's vote down 13%, nearly 500,000 votes gone between 2015 and today. SNP MPs who last night lost their seats have paid the price for what was a massive political miscalculation on Nicola Sturgeon's part.
Then she hinted she'd now press for a softer Brexit than the sort Theresa May describes.
We must, in my view, seek to deliver an open Brexit, not a closed one, which puts our country's economic growth first.
Then a direct warning to the English Tories to, well, change their style.
But just as the SNP must listen to the result on the independence referendum, we also have to listen to voters who did not give the UK Conservative Party the mandate we sought. It is incumbent on us to listen to other parties in Parliament and to people outside it about the best way forward.
Shaken and shattered to their very foundations, or building with unexpected vigour, a new Scotland and a new political landscape is taking shape in a way nobody here could have expected 24 hours ago. The Lib Dems, for instance, 1 seat to 4, and the return of former Minister Jo Swinson as one of them. And yes, the Jezza effect is not simply an English phenomenon. The Scottish Labour leader today called their move from 1 to 7 seats stunning. The Tories now want the SNP to take independence right off the table at the Holyrood Parliament in Edinburgh and beyond in Westminster. But this afternoon, Ruth Davidson has also set out some pretty clear water between herself and the DUP, upon whom her party nationally is so dependent.
She in fact tweeted a link to a speech she'd made saying all parties should recognise and celebrate same-sex marriage. Talk about a message to the DUP, talk about a message to Theresa May, talk about, dare I even say the word, independence of spirit. Back to you.
Alex, thank you. Labour said they had a fantastic night in Wales, taking more seats and holding on to key battlegrounds with the Conservatives. So Labour ended up with 28 seats, comfortably ahead of the Conservatives with 8 and Plaid Cymru with 4. They took 3 new constituencies directly from the Tories, while the Nationalists captured the Lib Dems' only remaining constituency in Wales. And the leader of UKIP has stepped down after the party failed to gain a single seat in Parliament. Paul Nuttall, who came third in Boston and Skegness, said it was clear that UKIP needed a new focus, new ideas. Now, as we've heard, a higher than expected turnout amongst students and younger voters is believed to have played a very big part in Labour's success at the polls. Jackie Long is in Wolverhampton tonight. Jackie.
Yes, well, we're in a seat that was predicted to go to the Conservatives, but not only did Labour retain it, it increased its majority, a trend seen across the country, especially in university towns like this one. Both main parties aimed policies at righting the disparity across the generations, from Labour's pledge to scrap university fees to the disastrous Conservative launch of the so-called dementia tax. We're in the former Chubb factory, where a few weeks ago we presented the programme with an audience of young and older voters and debated some of the issues facing them, and some of them are joining us again to speak about today's result. Alice Ramdahal, 18 years old, part of this huge surge of young voters for Corbyn, but he lost, and democracy has seen Theresa May standing outside number 10 today. Nothing to see here, nothing's changed effectively. I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, of course, I'm quite disappointed that he lost, as I was someone who voted. It was my first time voting in this election, and because so many people around me seem to be in favour of the Labour Party and the policies they stood for. People young and old, actually, while we're talking about an age divide. But, of course, you know, we've had an election, that's the result that's came out, and you've just got to hope now that what happens is that Theresa May will work for the good of everybody, not just the people who voted for her party.
Gillian Heath, you were a May supporter. She said, if I lose 6 seats, I've lost the election. She lost double that, and she's still standing outside Downing Street today. That's a harsh lesson for some of these young voters who hoped for change.
It is a harsh lesson, yes, but Theresa May is still the Prime Minister. She's still managed to get the DUP to stand with her, so she can still form a government, and I think she will do a good job.
And you think that's right? I mean, politically, of course, it's right constitutionally. Is it morally right when she took us into an election that didn't deliver for her?
It didn't deliver for her, but it didn't deliver for Jeremy Corbyn either.
And it didn't deliver, did it,
for
the young people? Who?
No.
That's the point.
Now, Andy, when we met you last time, you were very angry about the intergenerational divide.
Yes, I was.
A Jeremy Corbyn supporter. Does this make that divide worse, or does it start to improve things?
I'm really excited about what's happened with this, what I call a youth revolution, and I've really experienced it, and we've seen it happen in this election. It has turned this result into something much more significant than just this election. And the kind of problem you're raising, and what you're asking about, here's a party that didn't win an election still at Downing Street, is part of what young people need to understand and grasp and see, that they're part of an ongoing game. I feel that some of the shame I felt for my age group, the kind of world they'd created, where young people felt left out, I've watched that change in literally just a couple of weeks. Now, that's an exciting and extraordinary change.
I mean, Graham, you sort of are at the opposite end of the spectrum. You're 70 years old, if you don't mind me mentioning.
That's
a
right.
Labour voter
Yeah.
who voted Lib Dem to stop Mr Corbyn.
Absolutely.
Is that a generational thing?
I don't think it's a generational thing. At the end of the day, I look at Jeremy Corbyn and I see a man who cannot really lead.
Even after last night,
he didn't win. And I don't believe he'll ever be a Prime Minister, as it happens.
Theresa May didn't win either.
You know, he got so few seats. I mean, the
got
amount
3
of
more
seats
seats than Gordon Brown got.
that Labour got this time is actually pitiful, considering how badly the Tories ran their election. I mean, it was a terrible campaign. twisting and turning.
Well, I think we have a situation...
And he still didn't manage to win. You know, it's just not good enough. He's got a good way towards it, yes, but it's just not enough. And I don't think he's ever going to
Ellie, you're a young woman who voted for Theresa May.
Yes, and I think we've got a situation where we've got Corbyn, who's a very good leader and delivered on the campaign, and I was quite impressed with the Labour campaign. And then we've got someone like Theresa May, who's not a very good leader and didn't kind of bring that forward, but she's a very good in office, and Jeremy Corbyn would be disastrous in office.
Do you think it's right that she should be doing what she's doing today?
I think what she said on Downing Street, she should stay, she should go through with it. I don't think she's going to last particularly long. She's definitely not going to last till the next election.
6 months,
Zoma, now you started as a Tory, but voted for Jeremy Corbyn. Was Theresa May right to stand there today and say nothing's changed, I'm here for the duration?
No, absolutely not. The Conservatives may have won the battle. Theresa May has lost the war. Her manifesto, her campaign, her personality has lost the issue.
And you speak as a Conservative?
Yes.
Who voted for Jeremy Corbyn?
Jeremy Corbyn spoke to me, spoke to my issues. I am intrinsically, ideologically a Tory, but Jeremy Corbyn addressed the issues that mattered to me. I felt Theresa May merely gave me cliches, sound bites, and nothing of real substance.
Can I ask, just this generational divide that is being talked about, does it matter? How do we move forward?
Well, we've already started. I mean, even in this discussion, it's fabulous that people are saying, look, I got involved in the process and I was able to look and I made a decision. I didn't vote Tory. I voted Labour in this case because of the issues of leadership and the actual manifesto. I did it because I was accessing it, and I've watched thousands of young people join that, and that has made us have to sit up and start saying, how do I defend our positions and our privileges and all the imbalances? And I think that is next on this agenda. That's what's going to happen next.
Gillian, what do you feel? Do you feel the same sort of fervour for a youth revolution?
I don't think there'll be a youth revolution. I think that the young people now will make more of an effort to go out and vote, because a lot of the youngsters, the ones that I know, have just said, oh no, I ain't going to bother, it won't make any difference to me.
Alison,
but I think now they will stand up and say, yes, I will vote.
Alice, over to you. You voted for the first time yesterday. Yes. Will you keep voting? Do you feel more passionate now or less?
Well, I feel like the people around me are a lot more passionate. I feel driven now. I feel hopeful still. And one big point that I think has come out of this, personally for me, I'm hoping there's going to be a move to a more proportional electoral system. I feel like that's really, that would be far more reflective.
Some agreement there. Thank you so much for joining us. They've been debating since they arrived. I think it's going to keep going as well. Thank you very much. Back to you, John.
Jack.
Yes, well, welcome to Brussels, where the whole point of the election, as far as Theresa May was concerned, was to secure a big majority, to strengthen her negotiating hand with the other 27 EU member states. In fact, now she's a weakened Prime Minister, presiding over the kind of chaotic minority government that she disdained. Now, Remainers in Westminster hope that she's now no longer got a mandate for a hard Brexit. But on the other hand, because she is so vulnerable now, she's potentially at the mercy of the hardline Brexiteers in her own party, which could increase the chances of the UK crashing out of the EU without a deal. Now, negotiations on that deal were supposed to begin here on June the 19th. The view here is that those negotiations are now going to be incredibly messy. Guy Verhofstadt, the EU Parliament's Brexit negotiator, tweeted today yet another own goal. After Cameron, now May will make already complex negotiations even more complicated. The European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker said that he could start negotiating at 9:30 tomorrow morning.
I do hope that the result of the elections will have no major impact on the negotiations we are desperately waiting for.
Well, joining me now is Sergei Stanishev, who's president of the Party of European Socialists. Well, Jean-Claude Juncker there said that he hopes there will be no impact on the negotiations. There surely will be a delay to the start, won't there?
Well, evidently there is already an impact, because Mrs. May gambled politically, demanding a stronger mandate from the British people, and she didn't receive it. On the contrary, it appears that she may be leading a minority government without any clear mandate on the type of negotiations she is to hold with the European Union. And of course this is a concern for us. But
so does that make it a hard or soft Brexit more likely, do you think?
I think it's very clear that the European Union is not looking for a hard Brexit. On the contrary, we are looking for fair negotiations according to the rules which we all have and which we should follow. And I must say that now, after the elections, the Labour Party in Britain, which is a member of our political family, had a remarkable result, a very inspiring campaign, and their voice will be heard even more. Also with our prime ministers, because Mr. Corbyn has a very regular dialogue with the heads of state and government from our political family, and they're a very substantial part of the council.
So might the EU then, if there's some kind of compromise Brexit deal that you hope is in the office, might the EU move some way, for example, on the issue of access to the single market?
Look, Mrs. May's government, if she will have one, will face a united position and clear mandate from the European Union. There cannot be bilateral deals which would weaken our common position. That should be clear to her, I believe. And again, our first priority is to have a very clear and fair decision for the British citizens who live in the EU and Europeans who live in the UK. This is the #1 priority, because this is their destiny, their lives. And we have to be responsible. And I must say that what we have seen, all this rhetoric about hard Brexit on behalf of the Conservatives, it's a shame. You have to be responsible to your own citizens, to your country. And what we saw in the last months is another political gamble, as it was with the referendum itself, because it started for political reasons which were domestic, and this is the way how politics should not be done.
Sergei Stanishev, thank you very much for joining us. Well, that's The View from Brussels. John, back to you in Westminster.
Thank you, Kathy. The new Parliament will be the most diverse ever, with 51 MPs from black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds. It'll also have most women MPs ever, a total of 208. But for one woman, it hasn't been the best of campaigns. When Theresa May announced the election, she had a 20-point lead in the polls. By this morning, her hopes of a majority had vanished. Matt Frye spent last night in her constituency and looks back now at where it all went wrong for the Prime Minister.
What's the naughtiest thing you ever did? Oh, goodness me. Gosh. I have to confess, when me and my friends sort of used to run through the fields of wheat, the farmers weren't too pleased about that.
But there was something far more naughty, in fact reckless, that the vicar's daughter ended up doing, which upset more than just the farmers. And it was this.
I have just chaired a meeting of the Cabinet where we agreed that the government should call a general election to be held on the 8th of June.
The plan was to cement her power, swell her majority, make it all about the name on the bus, and garnish it with a few simple slogans on robo-repeat.
Brexit means Brexit. Brexit means Brexit. Strong and stable leadership. Strong and stable leadership. Strong and stable leadership.
That was the plan. But the reality was a masterclass in failure. Lesson 1. If you call a snap election, do show up to the debate.
The Prime Minister is not here tonight. She can't be bothered. So why should you?
Lesson 2. Manifestos matter. And when you get it wrong, admit it.
Nothing has changed. Nothing has changed.
But something had changed.
Doesn't this show that you are really weak and wobbly, not strong and stable?
Lesson 3. Get a bigger gang. 2 advisors, hugged close like a comfort blanket, just aren't enough. And so last night to the Magnet Leisure Centre in her Maidenhead constituency, where even Lord Buckethead was channeling the Grim Reaper.
I've been waiting to meet you.
And where the knives were very much out. How would you characterise what's happening tonight, as far as we know?
I would say that it's the end of a sort of dictatorial elective dictatorship and the wishes of somebody who really wanted one. And I'm absolutely delighted, because I want more people being involved in more decisions. So a little more control over their freedoms, yeah.
You think she's shot herself in the foot?
I wouldn't say shot herself in the foot, because that would damage a good pair of shoes.
The hour before dawn, she finally marched in for a victory that must have tasted like bitter lemons. This morning, the skies above genteel Maidenhead looked ominous, much like the mood of a country that's been hit by terror and uncertainty.
Why on earth are we cutting police numbers? I mean, that doesn't make sense at all. You know, we've got an NHS that they're claiming has got more money than ever, but it's failing and it needs help.
Theresa May was supposed to be the designated driver of Brexit Britain. Even her staunchest supporters at the Maidenhead Rowing Club think that this election has unmasked her as surprisingly reckless.
She didn't portray herself very well. She was using kind of that one soundbite of strong and stable, and every interview, strong and stable, and it became overload. Calling the election, and when she didn't need to, you'd think that she actually had a pretty damn good idea of what she was going to do, and it didn't seem like that. It didn't seem like that at all.
Did you vote for her?
I did, yes.
Were you disappointed by the campaign?
Yes.
So where did she go wrong?
Don't know. I really don't know, but I wouldn't like her job, I know that.
Giancarlo Caldesi has been cooking for her for years. Scallops is one of her staples. And although disappointed, he is that rarest of things these days, a cautious optimist.
I think she's learnt a lot. It's a terrible learning, but she's learnt a lot. And this will, in a sense, I feel what has happened will bring the country back to a good level, to a very good level, because remember, defeat, or what is partial defeat, it could mean for us a brighter future, because we learn. She's a learner. She learns from what she's done. And
what doesn't kill you makes you better.
Totally, like in my restaurant. What doesn't kill you will make you fatter.
Who knows where Theresa May's self-inflicted gamble will lead her, her party, and indeed the entire country. If only she had stuck to running in fields of wheat.
Matt Fry in Maidenhead. Joining us now, the TV presenter Kirsty Allsop, who's a Conservative supporter, and the lead singer of the rock band Reverend and the Makers, John McClure. He was there on stage supporting Mr. Corbyn the other night and at many other gigs. I mean, you know, it was a party that was in division. There seemed to be people who didn't want him and people who did want him. Is this going to heal the deal?
I think so, yeah. You mean you've seen several Labour MPs already sort of, you know, owning up and holding their hands up and admitting that they've got the whole sort of process wrong and misjudged Corbyn. I'm a massive fan. I think that he offers something that we've not seen in British politics in my lifetime, perhaps even. We've never had a left-wing government or a party that's pushed a progressive agenda like this, and I think he's a great fella.
What do you make of him?
I remember when he got first elected to the leadership and he pushed Laura Kuenssberg from the BBC aside, and that first moment I just thought, oh, no. And if you talk to loads of different people who have interviewed him and dealt with him, his policies, what he says, can be very intoxicating, but I don't know about what he actually deep down believes, particularly about women, and the anti-Semitic thing really worries me.
As we speak, do you feel any more comfortable about Theresa May? Do you even know what she thinks?
No, I never felt comfortable about Theresa May, I've got to be honest, John, and on the day she called that election, I said, this is a huge mistake. And my greatest regret today is I didn't put money on it, because I really believed. We've paid £130 million, John, that's what it cost to have an election, to give the SNP a bloody nose, which we didn't need to do, and to get into bed with the DUP. It's a really shameful day for the Tory party.
But should she stay?
Do we need more chaos? Do we need uncertainty? Yeah, I mean, my gut thinks she should go, but I think people are just so sick of this. We need to get on and do what we have to do. The problem about Brexit is we thought we were leaving, and in fact we were being expelled.
John, do you think that Corbyn can seriously change the face of Britain? It looks as if new people have turned out to see him, and they're not just momentum.
Absolutely. The times are changing, you know, for want of a better phrase. 72% youth turnout, overwhelmingly in favour of Labour. I travel all over this country playing me gigs and stuff. Kids love him, young people love him. Not one tweet, not one Facebook post on the Conservative Party encouraging the youth to vote, because they know that the overwhelming majority of young people are starting to listen to Corbyn. And when I had him on stage, there were 20,000 people singing his name. And that's not, you know, and I just think that now this election's over, we really need to give him his dues, because there's been an incredible smear campaign.
His colleagues, John, that was the problem. The people at the gigs, at the big rallies, they really love him. You really love him.
Well, are they being conned, or do you think he really is for real?
No, I don't think he's for real, because his colleagues you know this, John.
He's not real.
He's been saying the same things for 30, 40 years. He's a conviction politician. Theresa May, she just came out with an endless sort of tirade of sound bites, strong and stable, Brexit means Brexit. Jeremy Corbyn has nuanced arguments. He's been saying the same thing for 30 years.
Two wrongs don't make a right, John. I don't believe in Theresa May anymore, particularly, but as far as the economics of it go, John McDonnell should not be our Chancellor.
Do you think there'll be another election this year?
Oh, do you know what?
I hope so.
You hope so?
Yeah.
You hope so?
The momentum lies with Corbyn. Look at this place behind you, centuries of history, and we're going to have the DUP there, who, you know, climate change deniers, you know, misogynistic, homophobic. Is that the sort of people you want in your government? Because it's not what I want.
No, and she was wrong to call it. It was the wrong thing to do.
It's not a terribly comfortable night, is it?
No, it is not a comfortable night.
And yet you won.
Well, I don't feel that we... No, I don't feel we won. I mean, I voted for my local candidate. It looks like she didn't win, and it's the last one to be called.
But it has to be said you must have won, because you got so many numbers.
It's a massive victory, especially... And also, I'd like to just point out that the media landscape's changed. That's why he's won. Gone are the days when Murdoch and Dacre and these people who don't want to pay tax in this country, but they want to sort of lecture us.
Sadly, we're going to have to leave it there. John McClure and Kirsty Allsop, thank you very much. We'll be back tomorrow at 6:30, but for now, well, I woke up today and I realised you know nothing, Jon Snow. I know a little bit more now, but there are, I suppose, known knowns and known unknowns. I just don't know. That's Channel 4 News. Good evening.
Live the good light in any weather. Transitions Adaptive Lenses and Boots Opticians sponsors Channel 4 Weather.
Good evening. The weather's looking pretty mixed this weekend, with low pressure moving in off the Atlantic, so there will be some rain, more especially for northern